What's poppin', mi gente? You boys back with another video. Now this video was initially going to function as a kind of guide for myself to the different elemental damage effects that I've implemented within the engine. But I figured versus keeping it private, I'd share it with all of you, so you'll have to excuse me if some of the explanations are going to be overly detailed. This is so that later on in the game, or later on in game development, if I run into some kind of bugs when I'm trying to assign these effects to other classes, I can quickly figure out what's going on, because that's a big part of what I do, is making everything modular and able to adapt to different character classes and various uses so that it's not a big ordeal later on down the line. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so the first thing I want to cover here is, while the death from the original game still exists, there is also a weaker kind of death animation that exists as well now, based off of the original Castlevania games. Let me first show you all the air version, and now the ground version. As you can see, again, these are based off of the original Castlevania game, so when you hear me mention weak death, I'm referring to either one of these. The normal death would be the one you all are used to, and that would be the original one. Now in the original game there was a variation of this for fire, ice, and lightning, but there was none for holy, there was none for dark, there was none for curse or poison. There was one for stone when Alucard was turned into a statue and killed, but Richter couldn't have status effects inflicted on him. So that has been corrected now, and there is an effect for every element present in the game, with the goal here being not to reinvent the wheel, but to repro the originals and improve on them some. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one is going to be hit or strike type damage. This is the default damage type. It involves the player having some red color cycling for a short time, as well as a red radial overlay that is put in over him that is faded in probably about 33%, I'd say. As for the death animations, I've already showed them previously, both the weak ones and the normal death one. So let's go ahead and move on to cut damage next. Also, a quick side note, for those who haven't noticed, he does flicker for about a second after taking damage. If it happens in the air, the flickering doesn't begin until he lands on the ground and you have control of him again. Basically, once you can control him, just like the original Castlevania games, he has a window of invulnerability. Now the flickering might come out a little choppy in the video, but I can assure you in-game, it looks perfect. So, as I was saying, let's show cut type damage next. And as you can see, it's very similar to hit, with the color cycling lasting a little longer, the red overlay fading in more, and of course there's some red blood particles there as well. As for the death animation, the only difference is there's now red blood particles, versus if it was a hit type death, you wouldn't see those red blood particles there. He would just fall to the ground, as you saw in the when I showed the death animations previously. The normal death, there's literally no difference there at all. Still bloody, just like the original. Red overlay and he's faded out to red. Pretty simple here. Also, quick side note here. There is a spirit type of damage in the game that is designed to be the default damage type for magic attacks, just as hit is the default damage type for physical attacks, but again, since it functions as the default type, it's the same type of death and pain animation, or same death and pain effects as getting struck by a hit type attack. Fire, on the other hand, is a much more interesting and intricate one. Surprisingly so, I have to say. Now, the way fire works, if you're observant, and it's easy to see in the air, is that first it creates some orange color cycling over him, along with an orange radial overlay. However, flame puffs, well, I'll call Flame Puff 01, the bigger type, are created over him initially while that color cycling goes on, and as soon as the color cycling ends, then Flame Puffs 00 and 02, both of which are smaller, are created over him, while square particles are created as well. And it took me a little bit to figure out this little intricacy, but if you play the video in slow-mo, I managed to repro that he'll start actually burning more once the orange color cycling fades away, which I just thought it was interesting how much attention to detail they paid in the original game to this. However, I went one step further with this and put in different varieties of flame attacks in the game. Well, there were different colored flame attacks in the original game, but when the player was hit, he would always go into the same orange particles. That's not the case anymore. As you can see for the blue ones, I put in some blue particles, and I set him up so that he still has the orange overlay, but the color cycling is blue as well to add a neat little effect to it. For those who don't know, blue flames are actually flames that are very hot. If you look at a gas flame, you'll notice it's blue near the bottom, it turns orange near the top, so I tried to repro that effect somewhat here. And then of course there's purple flames, which are generally used for dark energy type of attacks. Now those, I went completely the purple route, which the square particles turn a bit orange near the end, but you'll notice he's blinking purple, has a purple overlay, etc. And last but not least is green flames, which these are pretty basic. You know, green particles, green overlay, green color cycling. Couldn't really come up with anything too crazy for this. I'm open to ideas for it. This is going to be used for more of ethereal type of attacks, like maybe something undead or otherworldly. As for the death animations, I'm not going to show you all, but I will show you the basic ones for the orange flames. Mostly because otherwise we'd be here all day. As you can see, he continues burning now during the weak death animations. And as for the normal death animation, it was correctly repo where it looks like he's burning up. And that he turns orange, there's some orange screen flash and orange overlay, and as he finishes vanishing, all the flames stop. Now I could have done something like that with the weaker death animation, but you got to keep in mind, once he hits the ground during the weaker death, I mean, you're going to pretty much hear a theme play, and then that's it. The screen's going to start fading out, so we didn't need to get too crazy with the weak death one versus the normal death one. You obviously have a lot more time to see it on screen. Also, one more quick thing, and this may be unnoticeable in the video, is just like in the original, the flames flicker between additive and normal blending, which is another little intricate thing they did in the original game. If you're not sure what I mean, pause the original game on the map while there's some flame effects up and notice how they're flashing. They're literally quickly switching between additive blending and normal blending, which I managed to repro here as well. Next up, ice effects. I'm going to hold off on showing you guys freeze until near the end of the video along with petrify. And I'm just going to show you the damage effects for now. For those who are paying attention, you'll notice as soon as he hits something solid, the ice is shattering. Of course, there's particles now as well, and you'll notice I still use the kind of retro 3D effect he had in the original game with the ice itself. I didn't get fancy with it. I could have honestly designed something a lot nicer looking, but I wanted to go for the legacy kind of effect. I felt like taking it out would take something away from the game. What I did do, though, is I did correct it to be fully wrapped around him now. In the original, it looks like it's around him, but it's actually just in the front of him. And you'll also notice that it looks a lot more like ice now because I've changed the coloration and the blending, and of course, I threw a couple of particles in as well. Also updated the sound effect when it shatters because the original shattering effect it's used for lamps in the game and it sounded really out of place. I'll also show you his death animation, which isn't too much more to say there. I did add some particles into it. When he gets frozen in ice, he does color cycle a dark blue as well. It's a little hard to notice in the video though with all the effects in front of him now. First up, his weak death animation. And I'll use an aerial one here. And now, the normal ice death. And I basically set it up to look like he's shattering into a million pieces. I could have done something more high res, but I wanted to keep it simple with this. I didn't want to go super HD, and I wanted to keep the old retro effect he used in the game while improving on it slightly. And while I will admit that creating that ice effect was not easy because I'm dealing with 3D objects in a 2D environment, and well, with the way Unity works with these scenarios, it's a bit of a pain. So it took some effort to get that working properly, but doing this next bit of lightning damage effect was an absolute fucking nightmare. A little info about the original game is it uses 2 color palettes for the lightning effect, and basically what happens is the lightning effect is created on screen, and it's created in bits and pieces. I think it's something like I forget the exact length of each sprite, but it basically, if you look in the files, you'll find two lightning sprites. The thicker, more detailed one is used. I've never seen the skinnier one used anywhere. And then there are 2 color palettes for it, and they basically take that lightning bolt and cut it into, I think, 5 or 6 pieces. And then what they do is they spawn that lightning bolt piece by piece, randomize the angling a bit, and randomize the positioning some, so it gives you this kind of chaotic look to the lightning, like lightning in real life, that it slaps all over the place and changes directions in a split second, etc. They then put that across a texture and scroll the texture. And for lightning, they do that over and over and over. Each one of those lightning effects you see over your character when you get hit by an electric-based attack is a different 3D object. It is basically a circular 3D object with a transparent mesh other than the lightning, and those are spawned over and over the player. It's suffice to say that reproing that in the game here, while keeping the code from becoming a ridiculous mess and being an absolute resource hog, was a bit of a challenge, but I did manage to do it, and I did actually manage to improve on it some, so it didn't look so chaotic and messy. You know, that's enough with the preamble. Seeing is believing, as they say, so here you go. And as you can see, the player also has some new sprites involved with it, where his bones are exposed. The original ones were removed because they just didn't look right, and they were redone. And the same thing was done for Alucard. You can now see his bones when he's electrified. There's also a yellow radial overlay put in over him for extra effect when he's damaged. Now that doesn't look like much, but believe me when I say this was an absolute pain in the ass to get looking just right. I did get a bit creative with his weak death animation, with the weak death animation effects, excuse me. And that you'll notice he does the same thing that Alucard does. His whole body turns black with a blue outline around it when he's first shocked, and he keels over and dies with the yellow radial overlay still going and the electricity just blasting away over his soon-to-be very charred body. Now, as for his regular death animation, it actually uses a unique purple radial overlay just like the original, while his body fades out and the electric effects disappear as his body finishes disintegrating. So again, the goal there was to repro the original one. I did again choose to use that black with a blue outline effect on his weaker death because I really liked that effect for Alucard, but with him now showing his skeleton, it wouldn't be able to be used otherwise, and I wanted to include it somewhere in the game. Yes, I know, a very minor thing, but again, I loved the effects of the original, and I truly do want to make sure I presented each and every one of them that I physically could here, because I do believe that the people who came up with them in the original were geniuses, considering especially the hardware restrictions they had on them and the huge space and VRAM limitations presents to them as well. Okay, so now we're getting into some of the simpler effects, starting with Holy, and all I can say about thinking of that is thank fuck. Because these were actually a bit easier to do and didn't take centuries to get looking just right. Holy is pretty simple. Create some green sparkles, green color cycling, and a green radial overlay that's faded in about, much like Hit, about maybe 33%. As for his death animation, green radial overlay and the particles continue. And now for his normal death, you can see I make it look like his body disintegrates into those holy particles. Again, green radial overlay, except it's a lot brighter. And there's some green flashing of the screen. If I haven't mentioned it in the previous deaths, they all have some screen flashing going on. But in the original game, if you were killed by a holy attack, you would just explode into a shower of blood, just like you had been hit with a basic attack. As I said, I wanted to put one in for each and every element to make things more intricate and look a little more updated. Next up, another fairly simple one, Dark Element. And those particles are basically just a flame particle that was colored black and scaled some. The color cycling on him is actually interesting because it actually uses something called a subtractive radial overlay. Instead of using additive blending, it uses subtractive blending. And then I, of course, use some black color cycling over him as well. As for his weak death, same thing, except the particles continue, and you can actually see that subtractive overlay a bit better now. And now for his normal death animation. And again, this one's all new. The screen flickers black. His body kind of fades from purple all the way to black and then disappears as it seems to disintegrate within the particles. Next up is going to be poison type damage, which the particles themselves are pretty simple. And I want to actually see if any of you will recognize them. If you think you know where these bubbles come from, feel free to comment down below. I don't have the status effect in-game just yet, but that'll come later because it's fairly simple to decrease the player's health over a set interval. Now this one, although it looks fairly simple, this was actually a pretty complex one to repro from the original game. Mostly because the overlay used on him is what's known as a subtractive overlay, but it's a linear type of one with a unique pattern going. And the color cycling used underneath him is actually black to create a unique type of effect, and I really wanted to repro the original effect because I thought it looked really, really good, which I succeeded in doing here. The particles, as I said, are all new though because there originally was no particle for poison type damage. And originally if you took poison type damage and for some reason you were invulnerable to it, it would just look like a typical hit type of damage attack, which was pretty boring. And now for his weak death animation. I basically set it up so that the overlay continues but the bubbles stop as he falls over, making it look like all the poison's is now circulating in his system, killing him. And you all know what comes next. That effect took a bit of work to get it looking just right where he disintegrates like that. It almost has a black and purple mix going on, and I wanted to get it looking a certain way. Almost like his body was degrading and the bubbles were just all the poison evaporating his body as it was leaving his system. Yeah, I know, I'm kind of overthinking this one, but sue me, motherfuckers. You gotta be passionate about what you do to put in this kind of effort. Or be a bit insane. Possibly a mix of both. You decide. Alright, so we're coming up on the end here, folks. The only ones left is going to be Curse and Stone type damage. And then, oh yeah, I did promise earlier in the video to show you the new Petrified and Frozen effects, so we'll do those as well. Got my glass of cognac here, so I can sip on it while I'm showing this off. Here's Curse. Your eyes don't deceive you. Those are little red skulls, chattering skulls coming off him when hit by curse type damage. And that overlay used on him is a particular type of one. Just like poison, it is a subtractive linear one, but it uses a specific gradient. Let me see if I can pull it on screen so you guys can see it. There it is. That's the gradient used in that simple little overlay that briefly flickers over him when he takes damage and also when curse status effect is inflicted on him. I had to actually corrupt quite a bit of data to get this right, but it's amazing how it looks with subtractive blending thrown in. You would never notice it. Now if I kept it on him when he was cursed, it might be a bit more apparent, but because he uses subtractive blending and he also uses a unique type of color cycling that's a red and kind of army green mix underneath it all. So they got really intricate with this effect, and this is again why I was so interested in trying to repro this stuff, because I knew it'd be a hell of a challenge. Now let's see what happens when he dies. And now his normal death animation. And I basically set it up to make it look like the curse is ripping his body apart and taking his remains to the next world, bit by bit. Painfully, horribly. Once again, for the particle effects, if any of you think you can name where those particles, the sprites for those particles come from, comment down below. I'll give you all a hint here. It's from another Castlevania game. And last and probably least, we have stone type damage, which is very rare. You usually won't see this considering stone attacks have a high chance of petrifying, but if they don't, gray color cycling, gray overlay, some dust particles stuck to him, and some square particles that drip off him as well, which are kind of hard to see on a video if he's not in the air. That's why I keep jumping up. They're more noticeable like that. So there's no unique death for this one. The reason is because if you are killed in stone status, regardless of defense, or if you're killed by a stone elemental attack, regardless of your status defense, you are petrified. And it creates a unique animation, which I'm about to show you right now. And there it is. Your character is instantly petrified, and the statue falls apart, while dust particles come off it, and the bottom bit disintegrates. Now, let me show you the regular petrify effect as well here. Oh, and he does have a unique statue based on whether he is standing or crouching as well. And let's see what happens if you get petrified in midair. Now, keep in mind, this only happens if your HP is reduced to 0. So, this isn't a thing where you could have full health, get petrified in midair, and then this occurs. But as you can see, it disintegrates into 1,000,000 pieces when the statue hits the ground. I got that from God of War years ago. I remember playing it and thinking it was a good idea to try to jump away as Medusa was petrifying me, thinking I'll be just fine, it'll give me more time to shake out. Well, anybody who's played the game knows when you do that, as soon as you hit the ground, you shatter into 1,000,000 pieces and die instantly. Now again, no instant death here, but I definitely want to recreate that effect. Oh, and there's actually one more variant on it as well, if you guys will give me just a second to tweak a couple of values. If you are petrified in stone status, and you are hit by something that would normally send you flying, or that would shatter you out of the stone automatically, you get this little effect instead, where your pieces are sent flying. Nothing too major there, but just a little random thing a little minor thing I wanted to throw in to add to the intricacy of it, because it would make no sense to be in statue form and get smashed by, say, Medusa charging forward with her shield, and your character just scream, shake in place, and fall apart, versus shattering into 1,000,000 pieces like that, which looks like a lot more force was involved. And now let's look at the regular petrify status. And as you can see, I just got nailed by an attack from that enemy that instantly knocks me out of petrify, which would cause me to take extra damage. But that's also a damage control I put in place, so let's say something does massive damage to you, I can also put a tag on it so that you're not getting hit over and over and over while you're petrified and helpless, which would be idiotic. No one-shotting here, guys. I can't stand games where you make one mistake and your game ends instantly because of one little tiny error. But as you can see, I managed to repro the dissolving effect where the pieces fall apart, the particles, the whole 9 yards. There's a lot involved here, but I won't bore you guys to tears with it. Last but not least is a brand new status effect, and the last thing I'm going to show off in this video, and that's being frozen. For those of you who have played Castlevania Circle of the Moon, you'll be familiar with this status effect. And for those of you who watched my videos for a while will also note that I said I was going to put a frozen status effect in. The difference here is that unlike Petrify where you have to tap left and right on the controller, here you tap buttons to get out of it, and it's a lot easier to break out of. But the reason for that is pretty simple. Unlike Petrify, where you can be hit repeatedly, you can still be hit repeatedly while you're frozen by weaker attacks. But if it is a stronger type of attack, what happens is, just like in Circle of the Moon, just like in Circle of the Moon, you're going to be knocked out of it, but you'll take a large amount of damage. Versus, see that weak attack, how it didn't do anything to me? My character was just shaking, rattling in the ice. Let's see what happens if I set that instead to be an attack that shatters ice. He was actually just killed, because he took a large chunk of damage. At the moment, I have it set to be your max HP divided by 6. So, freeze is one of those things that, yeah, it's pretty easy to get out of. You can get out of it fast. But a lot of enemies that freeze you are also being given an attack that's specifically designed to, okay, well now he's frozen, let me walk up and hit him again, knocking him out of the ice and do a chunk of damage. And you can see it just once again killed me because I've got my character's max HP set pretty high, but his regular HP set pretty low. So let me just briefly go ahead over here, and I'm going to lower that max HP so that the first hit doesn't automatically take us the fuck out. You can see how quick it is to shake out of it though. I mean, overall, it's pretty quick to get. I mean, you're going to want to get out of it fast, because if you get tagged, you lose a chunk of health that are instantly slapped out of the status in exchange though. Like that. And also, of course, if it's designed to send you flying, like, let's do this. See how he got sent flying? Here, I'll do it a little slower because he got sent flying in the right direction because how fast I went through him. Yeah, so there's also curse and poison and bleed status effects, but right now I have not completed those. And there's not much to show off there. Poison is just, you've seen the overlay for the damage. There's that and occasional bubbles coming out as you take damage. Curse is, you know, your character has a chance of an attack failing, and bleed is just blood's popping out of the enemy, your character rather, periodically. So not too much to show up there effect-wise. But that's all I've got for this video. It's going to be about 25 minutes long, and you know, I was, like I said at the start of the video, going to use this as a guide for myself, but I figured this is a perfect opportunity to show you guys what I've been working on for the last 3 weeks, and now they're done. I can use these for each and every character I put in the game. I don't have to do them again. They're nice and simple and set up to be very adjustable, pretty much drag and drop for every player class I put in, so this is a huge weight off my shoulders here. The next thing I am going to do, because this also taught me how to use particles, which is something important I needed to learn, is I'm now going to take some of the fire effects I had set up as sprites and turn them over to particles, which will take me a day, maybe 2 at extreme most, followed by something I mentioned in a previous video, and that's creating a time manager. And the reason I'm going to create a time manager for the project is because Unity does not have a way to slow down specific objects. It has a way to slow down, to change the entire time scale for the game, but there is no efficient way to just change time for singular characters, singular objects, or groups of objects and have it be effective. So I'm going to have to code something like that for myself, and I'm not quite sure how long that's going to take. I'm hoping not more than a week, especially because I've already created a bunch of notes for myself and guidelines and think I know how to do it. But that's that. You know, hopefully you guys enjoyed this preview video. Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe. If you're not a Patreon supporter, go join right now, please. You can join for as little as $5 a month, support this project. You know, again, I've got to survive here. I'm an adult, so the more donations I get, the faster work goes on the project. It's that simple, fellas and ladies. If you want to make a one-time donation, link will be down below to PayPal. You can do that as well. And as always, you're all welcome to join the forums and the Facebook groups to talk to other like-minded Castlevania fans. I think my next video is actually going to be a Q&A one, which I'll make an announcement about that shortly. But that's that. I hope everybody's doing good and staying safe out there, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.